Welcome back to the Meta-Humanism podcast. Today we will continue examining epistemology, the study of knowledge and truth, focusing on the typology of facts and knowledge. For those of you new to my channel, to my podcast, I am Bogdan, and this is the 6th episode of my podcast. I encourage you to watch the series of 4 introductory videos or episodes about who I am, my general approach for this podcast, and why it is called meta-humanism. You should probably also watch my previous video first, where I, if you haven't yet, where I introduce the field of epistemology, although you can watch it afterwards as well, just to connect the ideas I discuss here. It's just a logical progression from last time. Before I go into the subject matter, let me again, just like in the last video, I want to commemorate the victims of the Russian attack, this time against Sumy, on this last Sunday, the Palm Sunday, as Ukrainians were celebrating the holiday a week before the Easter holiday. Our tradition is to to go and bless the branches of a willow with the pussies on them. That's our tradition because palms don't grow in Ukraine, and so that became a long-standing tradition to bless these willow pussies. And then when there's this nice tradition when you come out with your branches blessed, you're supposed to lightly touch your neighbor, or anybody you meet. Other parishioners touch, and as if beating them and saying, the willow is hitting you, it's not me hitting, in a week there will be Easter. And that's just a kind of a the idea is with the blessed branch, it protects you, and it's kind of it's a symbol of protection, and it's just you want to protect your close ones. That's the meaning of it, and it's just a joke, and everybody's joking about it, and it's a nice tradition. And obviously, when this attack happened, 34 people or 35 now. People were killed, some children among them, and more than 100, 119 or more were injured. And these were all civilians. There's absolutely no military targets. And, obviously Putin is lying that there was some military target there. There wasn't. And Trump is now also saying, again, blaming Zelensky for the attack and for the war, which Russia started by invading Ukraine, and saying it was a mistake. A ballistic missile or attack against a major city is a mistake in his world. So it relates directly to what I'm going to be discussing today, the facts and knowledge and truth, which all matter. So, but I just commemorate the memory of all the victims. The Kryvyi attack on April 4th, which I mentioned last time, the attack on Sumy. Afterwards, he attacked Odessa as well. He was bombing Odessa, so that's how much Russia wants peace, just so you know. Okay, so this example basically makes this episode all the more relevant, and that's why in my brief announcement, the short video that I posted on some social media, I said that this is probably the most important video I've made so far, because it focuses on what the facts are, what types of facts are, and what types of knowledge we are able, as humans, are able to achieve or gain in various ways. So it relates to just knowing the facts and knowing why facts matter and truth matters. Okay, and in a confused world, it's as they say, is a revolutionary thing to say the truth, right? So. So last time we examined what epistemology was, and that it examined such things as the nature of knowledge, the sources of knowledge, the justification of knowledge, and the limits of knowledge, 4 main areas of investigation. Today we continue that examination of what epistemology does and what it studies by examining specifically the types of facts that ground our knowledge, and as well as the types of knowledge that we can gain as humans. The philosophical and scientific method is known as typology, which I'll be using today. And basically, it's quite common. It's almost intuitive in some ways. It is very common for social sciences, especially. Most comprehensively, this method was developed and formulated in the early 20th century by one of the founding fathers of sociology, Max Weber, who developed this heuristic notion of the ideal types used to interpret society. And the understanding behind it is that one should never lose sight of that idealization, which is built in creating a typology of facts and or categories, right? So, and the whole idea of heuristic, if you're unfamiliar with that word, heuristic device or heuristic, it means a rule of thumb, in other words. It's like a mental shortcut or a problem-solving strategy that helps you quickly make a decision or discover a certain solution or learn something more quickly and efficiently than otherwise. So it's not always perfect or accurate. It may diverge from perfection or accurate 100% accuracy, but it's much quicker than if you tried to approach the problem with 100% accuracy, and strive for perfection. It's a rule of thumb. It's quick. It's useful, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal. It is idealized, but it's not accurate. So you have to always keep that in mind. So it comes from the word heuristic comes from a Greek word which means to discover or to find, and it connects to another word you might have heard in your life about the famous exclamation of Archimedes when he discovered his law of water displacement. He said, "Eureka!" Which means basically I discovered it or I found it. So it's heuristic. It's based to the same idea, same word root. So the practice of creating types and categories is not new or modern. It's ancient. It started with Plato and Aristotle in ancient Greece. For example, Plato had ontological and epistemological categories such as being and becoming, one and many, his ideals, forms or ideas, like idealized forms, that every concept has an ideal form somewhere which we cannot approach, and whatever we perceive or know is only a copy of that ideal form. We'll examine that at some point when we talk about Plato more specifically in the future. I assume we'll get there, but that's example. And then Aristotle created logical categories, more specifically, like for example, substance, quality and quantity, time and place, and so on, which he used to study nature and reality and so on. And these, both Plato and Aristotle, have been very, very influential on the Western civilization and the philosophy through medieval times and into the modern times as well. So we will examine these things in the future. It connects to logic, to such branches of philosophy as logic, as I said, logical categories, and methodology. So the methods used to do philosophical investigations. And typology is just one of such methods. So this relates directly to that infamous notion of alternative facts. For example, if you remember, the Kellyanne Conway in the first Trump administration used that infamous phrase. It's flabbergasting. It's become normal, and this post-truth propaganda has become normalized in many ways. But this is just, there are no alternative facts. There's no such thing as alternative facts. And we'll look at that today. There are just facts, different types of facts, but there are no alternative facts. If a fact is established, there is no alternative to it. It's just a fact or falsehood, or a fact is truth of the matter or falsehood. So before we delve into the matter of facts and types, I want to share this meme I came across recently that is directly relevant to everything we will be discussing today and in the following videos in the future as well, but specifically today. It goes like this. Religion is based on faith, beliefs, and scriptures. Philosophy is based on logic, critical thinking, and argumentation. Science is based on evidence, observation, and experimentation. Okay? True enough, if you, nothing too controversial about it. This highlights three modes of knowledge, human knowledge. So religion, philosophy, and science are three ways of knowing things. They're not comparable, they're different areas, and we won't go into all the details of how they're different or comparable right now, but and it's not an exhaustive list. You could also add like art to it. Art is another mode of knowing. History, politics, economics, so social ways of knowing also are important. So historically, there was always some tension between religion and art, specifically poetry as an art. On one side, and philosophy, and I did examine that tension between philosophy and poetry in one of my prior videos. So there was that tension since the beginning of philosophy, and philosophy emerged as a kind of critical examination of poetry and mythology and religion. Excuse me. And science eventually emerged out of philosophy. So science is grounded in philosophy always. Science without philosophy is kind of I don't know what the good analogy would be, but basically it's missing something, missing a basic fundamental dimension of it. So science always has some philosophical stance, even if people are emphasizing only observation, experimentation. That's philosophical approach. If they say there's no other way to gain knowledge but through experimentation and observation, that's a philosophical approach. It's called scientism or positivism, meaning that no other way of gaining knowledge is valid other than science. I disagree with it, and we'll discuss other ways of knowledge today and in other videos, but there is a perspective like that, and it's called positivism. It's a philosophical perspective that grounds much of modern science. And it's very limited, in my view. So it excludes vast amount of knowledge that we as humans have gained through the centuries and ages, by narrowing it down to only very specific one kind of scientific knowledge. Okay, so the most or the earliest example of scientific approach was Aristotle. He started developing, like you could call it, proto-science. It wasn't a modern type of science, but he formulated first logical categories, and he studied the natural sciences, the natural world, and approached and sort of developed certain specific disciplines within the study of nature, which later were developed further throughout the Middle Ages and into the modern world. Let's look at the facts and opinions, and define and contrast each of those categories. So several useful quotes to set up this examination are these. A fact is an information without emotion. An opinion is information shaped by experience. Ignorance is an opinion without knowledge. And stupidity is an opinion that rejects facts. Okay? Another saying is that you can beat 40 scholars with one fact, but you can't beat one idiot with 40 facts. Never argue with a fool. They will drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Two quotes from Rumi, is a Persian poet, a very well-known Persian poet and mystic. The intelligent desire self-control. The children want candy. Don't waste your time arguing with the fool. He wants to talk, not to understand. And the second quote from him is, if you put fine clothes on a donkey, he'll still look for garbage. Don't bother throwing pearls to him. He doesn't know their worth. It's a slightly of a paraphrase, but from one of his works called Masnavi, if you're interested. And then lastly, one last quote is from the Bible, very well known, probably most known of the ones that I mentioned. It's from Gospel of Matthew 7:6. And it says, do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Okay? So pearls and swine, the proverbial pearls and swine. The idea here is that we should not sully valuable things like wisdom, beauty, or truth by going low, quote unquote, to meet the fools where they are. But That's a bit of a luxury to and the current politics and the situation in America clearly shows that. Say when they go low, we go high does not work when those who go low don't care about you going high, and their strategy seems to work better. You have to engage with them going low. You don't have the luxury to pretend you're beyond or above the fray. You have to argue with the fool, and you have to throw those pearls out before swine and put those fine clothes on a donkey, because that fool, swine, or donkey might have a lot of power and influence decision-making processes in society. Unfortunately, that's where we are. So sometimes it is necessary to speak truth to power, no matter the consequences, and no matter and don't just pretend that you're too above it all, because it leads to worse outcomes. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Truth matters, knowledge matters, and facts matter, and we have to speak them out and say that what the truth is, and keep repeating it despite all the lies and distortions and manipulations. What is a fact? Okay, a fact is a statement that is objectively true, meaning it can be proven, it can be verified, or observed, regardless of personal beliefs or feelings. Facts are based on evidence, observation, or logical proof. So it relates to philosophy and science, the earliest quote I mentioned today, but the philosophy is based on logic and argumentation, and science on evidence and observation and experimentation. So philosophy and science is where deal with facts, right? Religion is more about faith. It's less directly related to facts, although we'll look. I mean, this is just different kind of situation than philosophy and science. Key features of facts are that they are objective, verifiable, and stable. So the truth does not depend on personal perspectives. There are no alternative facts. There is a fact or it's not a fact. There's no alternatives in perspective. If there's a fact that is established, it is true for everybody. Otherwise, it's not exactly the fact, right? So that's the basic premise. Verifiable, it can be checked by checking the evidence, experiments, logical reasoning. Some way you can check whether that fact is true. Stable, it does not change based on individual beliefs, as I said. Perspective is not, that's more of opinion. That's what we will look at next. Examples of facts are like water boils at 100 degrees at sea level, let's say. It's an example of a scientific fact, experimentally verified. Or the Earth orbits the sun. Astronomical fact, observable through telescopes. A great example of how science progresses. There used to be a belief that sun orbited the Earth just because of intuitive knowledge that is not based in science. It seems like sun rises above the horizon and goes in the sky, but no, Earth is rotating and moving around the sun. We know that today that's not in a debate. It's a fact. There is no debate to be had. There are no alternative facts. It's a fact that the Earth moves around the sun. And it's not flat either. Okay, so people who believe, that's a religious belief or whatever. It's not scientific. It's not a fact. It's just it's psychotic belief that the Earth is flat. Whoever believes that, right? Okay, so it's stupidity basically, because it's believing something against the facts. The American Civil War ended in 1865. Also a fact. It's a historical fact. It's not in exactly the same category as a scientific fact about boiling water, but it's still a fact. It happened. It does not change. It will never change. Based on the historical record is basically how we know it. Now, an opinion is a statement based on personal beliefs, interpretations, or feelings, rather than objective verification. Okay, so opinions are subjective and can vary from person to person. And this is, let me just highlight something, because this relates to philosophy very directly. Nietzsche, in the late 19th century, he made a statement in one of his books. I don't know where it comes from exactly, which of his works, but basically he said that there are no facts, only interpretations. Very radical statement. And what he meant needs to be put into proper context of that's how he wrote. He wrote very aphoristically and very unless it is taken and interpreted within overall what he wrote about, it is liable to be misunderstood, and it has been misunderstood in many ways. But he did have this approach where he emphasized that perspectives are all that matter, that everything is a matter of perspective, right? That's a kind of an approach called perspectivism, and it was a progenitor of postmodernism in our world. So the postmodernist philosophers developed a lot of ideas that Nietzsche started, and including this idea that everything is a matter of perspective. There's no objective truth. And as I said last time, that's unfortunate because it was taken too far, because there is such thing as an objective truth, and not everything is a matter of perspective. And that's why I'm recording this video. Much of what we think is true is a matter of perspective. We do tend to kind of, the word is naturalize or reify certain things, like historical facts or historical customs. We think they're somehow natural. They're not natural. They're conventional. They were agreed at some point in time to, let's say, people agreed to behave a certain way, and they behave that way for so long that they think it's natural, and there's just no other way of behaving. Or religion, people grew up in a certain religious worldview, and they think it's natural to believe that worldview, and everything else is false and it's inaccurate, and only their version is correct, and it's natural, and so everybody else is wrong. And that's a problem. You can probably see how that would be a problem. So there is that tendency, and that's what Nietzsche was criticizing, that this kind of tendency to naturalize things and to pretend that things which are contingent in society are somehow irrefutable facts and cannot be disputed. That's what his main thrust was. It's not that he wanted to debate all perspectives and say that no facts matter, that you can say that sun orbits the earth just as well as that earth orbits the sun, or some nonsense like that. That's not what he said. He was an educated man. He was a philosopher, a philologist, so he would never say anything stupid like that. Okay, he meant something very different from what some people took it as. All right, so opinion is subjective, based on personal perspective or emotion, usually, not universally verifiable, cannot be proven true or false in the same way as facts can be. It cannot be reasoned or debated. So if somebody has an opinion, they may be well supported, informed opinions, but other opinions are purely personal, and you can't really debate them, or like judgment of taste or something. I have an opinion, this book is terrible, or this movie is just horrific, or whatever. Cultural judgments or aesthetic judgments, and just examples, right? You can't really prove that somebody is either right or wrong. It's a matter of perspective in that sense, right? So there is opinion, or also can be valid, and we all have opinions, and we are all entitled to our opinions, but we are not entitled to our own facts. Facts are universal and objective. That's the basic distinction. Examples of opinions: chocolate ice cream is the best flavor. Prove me wrong. You can't. For me, it's best. Actually, I don't believe that. I don't like chocolate, but ice cream. But let's say somebody says that chocolate ice cream is the best. Subjective preference, you can't prove anybody wrong. That's for them, it's the best, and that's an opinion. The Beatles are the greatest band of all time. Again, neither right nor wrong. For somebody they are, that's fine, that's your opinion. They were pretty great in their time. I don't know if they're the greatest, but that's debatable. Capitalism is better than socialism. Again, some people will debate you to no end, saying that's a fact. History has shown that certain ideologies like communism cause a lot of issues, problems, and suffering and atrocities, right? So like political Marxism in its orthodox Leninist or Stalinist or Maoist formulation caused millions to die, millions. Not to say that capitalism didn't cause millions. Imperialism caused also millions, maybe even more millions to die. It's just that nobody connects imperialism and capitalism so directly, and they distinguish the two, right? So, and capitalism is the dominant ideology today, so it's that plays a role as well. As there are people interested in diminishing the evils of capitalism, let's say, and exaggerating the evils of communism or socialism, which are not the same, but that's a different discussion. So that's an opinion, it's not a fact. You can present your argument about historical, just like I did right now, saying that capitalism is better than socialism, but that doesn't mean that your argument, your opinion, and your argumentation is beyond all doubt. No, it's debatable, and there are other perspectives will be argued, and yours is not necessarily the only true one. And that's what political polarization is. Where it's wrong is that politics is not about debating facts, which most of the time, much of the issues in politics are not matter of incontrovertible facts, but certain customs and social opinions, differing opinions. That's what politics does. Is that's where sphere where different opinions and different views of how society should be organized, on what should be prioritized, should be worked out, and hopefully in a peaceful manner. But sometimes it leads. It's like politics and war are connected very strongly. As one view says that politics is just war is just another way of doing politics, and vice versa, right? So that's pretty cynical one way. There's other views on that war, and then that's a matter for future videos. Philosophies of war and so on. So seemingly simple distinction: facts and opinions. Our job is done. We can finish this video and move on with our day, right? Yeah? No, not at all. Not so fast. So this is why I mentioned the notion of ideal types being useful, but not necessarily fully accurate. So there are several varieties of facts, and that complicates the picture. So there are different types of facts, and not all facts are equal. And that's what we'll examine next. But the basic distinction holds. Facts in general are objective, more exact, and not so much debatable. Opinions are. So, but let's look at different types of facts. And what kind of facts are there, and some of them may be more debatable than others, right? So that's the distinction. So the most basic distinction we can make between different types of facts are between physical or natural scientific facts and social facts. And that distinction and the idea of social facts being a thing comes from one of the fathers of sociology, a French thinker called Émile Durkheim. And he defined that category of social facts with his famous study of suicide as a social issue and not merely as an individual or personal phenomenon. So he studied it from the point of view of society and social processes. Slightly more complicated typology than just two physical and social facts includes three major categories: conceptual facts, empirical facts, and conventional facts. So let's examine those in turn. Conceptual facts can also be known as a priori, which is before experience, meaning a knowledge that comes before experience. Conceptual knowledge by using so it's conceptual and logical facts that are based on definitions, logic, pure logic, language, and mathematics, right? So no experience is necessary to arrive at those facts and to know, to have that knowledge. These effects can be known independently of experience, often just by reasoning and logical analysis, so by using our minds alone. Examples are just 2 + 2 = 4, basic mathematical truth. And if it seems a little bit too basic, I will give you a quote from Albert Camus, a French existentialist author, who said, "There comes a time in history when the man who dares to say that 2 + 2 = 4 is punished with death." That's one of his, obviously, post totalitarian reality, Nazism, communism. That's he was examining, the rebellion and the realities of his time. So speaking truth to power, or a Greek word for that is parrhesia. That's something, for example, Michel Foucault, a post-structuralist and postmodernist thinker, worked on, and did some work on parrhesia, and he wrote an essay on it, and we will examine that in the future. He's one of the important thinkers in postmodernism and post-structuralism. There's also the Orwell's quote here: "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary fact." Right? So that's another important aspect. So logical truth, it could be like all bachelors are unmarried, and then John, who is a bachelor, is unmarried. Right? So there's a statement of fact, and then you make an inference based on that John, all bachelors are unmarried, John is a bachelor, so he's unmarried. Right? Logical. You don't need experience, you can just look at the statement and logically arrive at. Metaphysical truths: nothing can be both true and false at the same time. That's a statement, that's a law of non-contradiction, and that's a metaphysical truth. You can't have same thing being both true and false. I am here, that means I'm not anywhere else. Okay? We won't talk about quantum issues right now, but that's an example. Something is either, let's say, if you have an apple, it's not a pear, right? It can be a pear at the same time. Second category is empirical facts. So they're also known as a posteriori, or after experience. So for this knowledge, you do need experience. And they're usually observation or direct sensory experience of the world. And this relates to quote unquote hard science, but also to history and psychology, for example. So there are hard meaning natural sciences, chemistry, biology, let's say, physics, and so on, astronomy, but also history and psychology also have empirical facts are established through those. Example could be scientific truths such as water boils at 100 degrees at sea level, historical truths such as the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, or personal experiences like I had coffee this morning. Okay, that's a truth, that's a fact, and it's from experience. And the third category is conventional facts. So those are basically knowledge that is based on social and linguistic conventions or agreements between people, intersubjective agreements between subjects or people. Social, conventional, and normative facts are based on human institutions, on ethics, on culture, aesthetics, things like that. These are facts that depend on agreement between humans, on social constructs or definitions, rather than independent reality. So it's contingent, and it's not it's derivative of human activities and human society and human culture, ethics, aesthetics. Right. So example could be linguistic truths such as the word dog refers to a domesticated canine. Okay, it's a fact. It's a conventional fact. We use that word to refer to a specific kind of animal, and that's a type of canine animal, not a wolf, not a fox, but a domesticated canine, right? It's a dog. That's how that word became to be used, and that's what it refers to. But we could have come up with a different word, and it would have meant, a lot of the words are agreed to are established by agreement, that we will call this thing that. That's why different languages have different ways of naming things. Legal truths is driving on the right side of the road is the law in the United States. That's a fact. It's a legal fact. It doesn't have to be. If somebody changes the law tomorrow and makes it that everybody has to drive on the left-hand side, there will be a lot of accidents and death the next day because somebody is stupid enough to do that. But it's possible, right? It's a legal fact. There is no connection to some larger natural reality that it has to be that way. And other countries that drive on the left side are proof of that, right? So it doesn't have to be on the right. Second is cultural norms. Shaking hands is a common greeting in Western cultures. Okay, so gestures, cultural norms are relative to cultures, and that's what anthropology, for example, studies and established a lot, that this is what really Nietzsche was arguing about first and foremost, about anthropological facts. Those are cultural facts. Those are matter of perspective mostly, not established. Those are interpretation, not facts. That's what, because his focus was on culture and religion and critiquing philosophy. That's what his focus was, and that's what he was talking about. Not that there is no objective truth whatsoever. Okay. Now, in addition to these three categories of major categories of facts, we can also talk about modal facts, which are based on possibility. So let's say contingent facts are facts that could have been different. Let's say Barack Obama was the 44th U.S. president. He was, but he might not have been if things turned a different way. So contingent. Necessary facts are those that could not have been otherwise. So if X is a triangle, X has three sides. If it's a triangle, it has to have three sides. There's no alternative. Possible facts, it's facts that could be true, or facts about what could be true. So like life might exist on other planets. We don't know, but it might be true. Counterfactual facts, facts about what would be true under different conditions. For example, if Napoleon had won at Waterloo, history would be different. Yes, if he had won, the history would be different, but he hadn't. That's how the whole genre of literature called alternative history. It's where people kind of investigate what would have happened if, let's say, Hitler won World War II, and there is this called A Man in the High Castle. There's a whole story written and in a movie, TV series based on that story, and what would have happened if World War II went the other way, right? And these examples are abound, and they're interesting actually to read as a literature, to consider what would have happened if, because history is contingent, okay? And one more category of facts is structural and meta facts. So this is actually looking at the facts from the side and trying to understand the relations between the facts. So for example, atomic facts, it's like if you take an apple is red. That's an atomic fact, very basic. You can't break it down into simpler facts, indivisible. Molecular facts, it's, this apple is red and tastes sweet. Okay, so you can break that up into apple is red, apple tastes sweet, two facts that make up a molecular fact. Two atomic facts make up a molecular one. Relational facts, facts about relationships between things. London is larger than Paris, for example. Okay, so it's a fact, and it's just because you compare certain separate facts and say which, and make some statements about that comparison. And subjective and objective facts, the subjective versus objective facts. So facts depend on individual experience, those are subjective, and then independent of individual experience, independent truths are objective. So let's say chocolate tastes better than vanilla to me, and the speed of light is, almost 300,000 meters per second, right? So less than 300, but almost. Two different ways. Those two latter categories are less important, so I will not be looking at them more at all in this video, but the other three categories, the conceptual, empirical, and conventional, are the three major ones, and we will be looking at those. Next, let's examine what types of knowledge are possible and relate the facts to those types of knowledge. It's possible to look at knowledge as having the following six main aspects. Then you'll see some patterns. A priori versus a posteriori. So again, it's definitional versus experiential knowledge. So definitional would be all bachelors are unmarried, just by definition. And experiential or a posteriori would be water boils at 100 degrees at sea level. Okay, you establish that by experience, by observing. Second category is explicit knowledge versus implicit knowledge. Explicit would be something you have in textbook or manuals, or something you can, explicitly look at and read. And implicit knowledge is something like riding a bike or recognizing a face. You can't really put it in words or learn it other than by implicitly or by experiencing in most instances. Third category distinction is propositional or declarative knowledge versus procedural knowledge. So that would be knowing that something is true, or that's propositional or declarative, and then versus knowing how to do something, that's procedural. So that would be saying Paris is the capital of France. It's a fact, it's the declaration, it's a proposition. Driving a car or playing a piano is a procedural types of knowledge. You still require knowledge, but you need practice, physical practice, and you learn it that way. You don't learn it by reading a book, right? You have to practice. Fourth distinction, theoretical versus practical. And you see some connections. These are not all mutually exclusive. These are just different aspects. So it's abstract versus concrete. So theoretical are like philosophy, math, more theoretical disciplines, let's say, or knowledge. And then, or within any discipline, there's theoretical kind of knowledge that you read in the books or you study. And then there's practical or concrete knowledge, which is like with, let's say, engineering, applied sciences, carpentry, cooking, things you can do. You can read about it, but unless you do it, you won't have knowledge. You'll just know about it theoretically, but you won't be able to do it. There's this joke that I heard when I was a little kid from my parents and their friends. They said, those who both know and know and can, they do. Those who only know but cannot, they teach. And those who neither know nor can, they teach how to teach. That's a joke. I don't want to disrespect teachers. It's a noble profession, and teachers are very important. I have a lot of respect for all kinds of teachers, professors, teacher as an archetype. Obviously, I'm doing this, video as a kind of within that archetype. So, but it's a funny joke nevertheless. There is some truth to that on some level. So the fourth was theoretical versus practical. Fifth aspect is empirical versus intuitive. So empirical would be observation, experimentation, science, sensation. Our senses, what we gain by sensing the world, all of our senses. Analysis, reasoning, method, applying certain scientific method to things or philosophical methods. That would be empirical. And then intuitive is more like instinct, feeling, insight, inspiration, artistic creativity. Not something you can quite put your finger on it, or explicitly mention, but it's still some kind of knowledge. And that connects to the arts, as I said, creative, artistic creativity, and also religion, revelation, and how you gain knowledge. And we'll talk about this in future videos because it's a slightly very specialized kind of knowledge, but it does relate to intuition and instinct and insight and revelation as kind of an intuition. So prophecy, where does that come from? Religious experiences. And the sixth aspect is formal versus informal. So which is education and training. That's formal. You go to university, you go to school, you get taught, you get drilled into, you have to memorize, you have to study, you have to read, you have to do, right? Everything we hated to hate when we went to school. We loved to hate, when we went to school. And then there's informal kind of almost you could say experiential knowledge, and that's a more fun type of knowledge, right? You gain by traveling, for example. You gain experience of different cultures, or how different people behave, or how to take a bus or take a train, or you gain from experiencing things, right? So that's also very important, and shouldn't be underestimated. So overarching distinction across these six categories, and it's important to note because this will connect to future videos which I'm planning, which will focus on distinction between episteme and gnosis. That's two different forms of knowledge, which I mentioned in previous videos, epistemology and gnoseology, two different sister disciplines. And again, to religious and mystical knowledge, and we'll examine that in the future. So, and this distinction, which I said, the overarching distinction is between discursive and non-discursive knowledge. Discursive knowledge tends to be knowledge you gain by using logic, language, inference, reasoning. It's always propositional, but not all propositional knowledge is discursive. So it's always, all discursive knowledge is propositional. So meaning you can always write out a statement and read it a statement. It's an explicit kind of knowledge. But not all knowledge that is formulated as a proposition is necessarily discursive. And that's a minor distinction. We won't go into it. It may build, discursive knowledge may build on empirical and experiential knowledge, but typically it's definitional, it's explicit, it's propositional, it's theoretical, and it's formal, typically. On the other side is non-discursive knowledge, and that's typically it's immediate, it's experiential, it's implicit, it's practical, it's intuitive, and it's informal. Okay, so those are major, as you can see, two very different modes of knowledge and very distinct kind of sides of the debate or typology of knowledge. And these six aspects kind of feed into this major distinction between discursive and non-discursive knowledge. Now let's look at the facts in terms of these types of knowledge. So for conceptual facts, again, I remind you, conceptual, empirical, and conventional facts. Conceptual facts are a priori, explicit, propositional, theoretical, intuitive, and formal. Just across the board. Example, all bachelors are married men. It's true by definition, no experience or empirical observation required. That's it. Conceptual facts are a priori, explicit, propositional, theoretical, intuitive, formal. Empirical facts, on the other hand, are a posteriori. They are also explicit and propositional, but they are empirical, not intuitive. They can be either theoretical or practical. For example, they lean towards theoretical if you formulate general laws based from scientific observations or experience. And they tend to be practical when they are applied, right? Knowledge, so engineering principles, for example. So it could be either. They can also be either formal or informal. For example, they are often more formal in scientific contexts, empirical facts, but they are more informal in everyday experience that we use in daily experience that we go by our days on a daily basis, and we use empirical facts. They're not so formal. Example of empirical facts is the sky appears blue due to Rayleigh scattering. Now, I don't know much about Rayleigh scattering, but basically that explains why we perceive the sky as blue, is that it reflects that color and we perceive it that way. But it requires observation and scientific explanation to achieve that knowledge and to explain why we say the sky is blue. And then conventional facts, they are a posteriori, so they require experience. They are explicit when they are codified in, like cultural codes or legal codes. So, for example, red means stop in traffic lights, but they can be implicit also if they are culturally ingrained, like social etiquette, for example, or certain ethical norms which are not written anywhere, but it's just understood. It can be both propositional and procedural. So the U.S. Constitution was ratified in 1788, is propositional. It's a true fact, and it's you can propose it, declare it, and it's true. But when you say how to greet someone in Japan, which is bowing is procedural, right? So that's a conventional fact that you have to bow in Japan, but it's not explicit anywhere. It's not propositional. It's just a procedural kind of knowledge fact. It's usually practical. It governs behavior rather than forming abstract theories. Most of the time, conventional facts are practical. They're intuitive in social contexts, so it's you just know how to interact politely with other people just by gaining experience as you were brought up by your parents and so on and others. But they can also be empirical when explicitly documented, like in legal systems, for example, right? So legal codes are empirical, but it can be both. And they can also be both formal and informal. Laws are formal, for example, but social norms can be informal, right? So moral standards may not be part. So that's why they say some laws are immoral and some moral norms are not necessarily legal or illegal. It's just two slightly different dimensions. Example of this would be the dollar is the official currency of the United States. That's a conventional fact. Just to reiterate, this is true because of the social and legal conventions, not because of any inherent natural physical necessity. Another dimension that I want to examine right now is types of intelligences. It's very also important dimension. So there are different theories, but one of the dominant theories is Howard Gardner's, developed in the early 1980s, of multiple intelligences, and he listed 8, and then he added a 9th later on. And the 8 were linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily-kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and then last one, existential, which is still kind of less grounded, but he's proposed the 9th, existential, but it's not as well studied as the others yet. So to relate it to knowledge, just to the different types of knowledge, I'll summarize. Linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences, so basically linguistic, logic, math, they're consistently aligned with formal, explicit, propositional, a priori, and theoretical types of knowledge. So they are dominant. These two, linguistic and logical mathematical intelligences, are dominant in academia and analytical contexts, and you know, that's a dominant form of knowledge when anybody thinks about what intelligence is. Bodily kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, and intrapersonal intelligences, which basically focus on how you control your body or other objects. Musical, rhythm, vibration, how you perceive, how you can interact with that. Interpersonal, how you interact with other people and relationships. And then intrapersonal, how you understand your inner emotion and inner world. Those tend to be implicit, procedural, intuitive, practical, and a posteriori, right? So stark contrast to the other intelligence, which are logical, mathematical, and linguistic, right? So suggesting there's a more embodied, social, and affective mode of knowing, right? So that's second important point. Then there is a point that naturalistic intelligence, it's a bridge between empirical and procedural knowing. So it's also informal and a posteriori, meaning it needs empirical, and it's not so much formal. It comes kind of more from experience and by learning, not by reading books, but by experiencing things. And it's rooted in direct experience and classification, right? Natural, classifying things into different types and plants, animals, and rocks, whatever. And then final point is the existential intelligence, the last one, which is more tentative, not so, as they say, officially canonized within that theory, but it correlates with theoretical, intuitive, and often a priori knowledge. So it's concerned with abstract meaning and metaphysics. So existential intelligence. And the point here is that these different intelligences are not just talents, they're different modes of functioning or ways of knowing. In other words, there is no one universal mode of knowing that is identical for everyone. Just because the logical, mathematical, and linguistic modes of knowledge have been privileged in Western civilization and academia does not mean that other modes of knowledge are somehow inferior. No. It doesn't mean that the math and logic don't matter. They still matter a lot in language. It definitely is central to our experience, but the other modes of knowledge should not be ignored or neglected or thought inferior to logical or mathematical or linguistic knowledge. So these modes of knowing determine much about what kind of truths we even find compelling, like what somebody is interested in and what wants to study, how we approach different problems and how we relate to the world, through rationality, through intuition, through body, through nature, or other aspects of reality, right? So it determines how we approach the world and how we see things and how we know things. We all admire musicians and sportsmen who excel in what they do, but we also admire scientists and philosophers and also celebrities and politicians, and all these three kind of categories of musicians, sportsmen. They need a special kind of knowledge. Celebrities and politicians are more about interpersonal success and knowledge, and then philosophers and scientists are more about the logical and mathematical, that kind of procedural, not procedural, but propositional knowledge and analysis. And so these are different aspects of knowledge, and they're all equally valid. We admire all kinds of people achieving all kinds of things in life, as long as it's a matter of knowing yourself. That whole idea of philosophy grounded in knowledge of self, and autistic spectrum disorder and neurodivergence, that's all kind of also demonstrates that different types of knowing and approaching the world are valid and should not be looked down upon or stigmatized. Okay. And the last topic, actually, let me stop here. There's another topic I wanted to maybe bring up, but let me leave that for next time when we talk about gnosis, which will be actually a few videos down the line. But it's basically movements of thought and connects to how thought is a living thing. So let me bring everything back full circle right now, all the facts, knowledge, and intelligences we discussed, and just remind you that all these typologies that I covered are not set in stone, meaning they're not some holy gospel. They're just heuristic devices. They just help us understand and classify certain things and gain a better grasp of what it is we're talking about, to orient ourselves in a very complex world, and where truth matters, facts matter, and knowledge matters. Okay, there are people who are actively undermining truth, facts, and knowledge in politics today, and we need to fight back. We need to really care about it. There's much overlap. If you noticed, going through these categories, there's much overlap, flexibility, and interconnectedness in all of this. It's not, as I said, these types are not some mutually exclusive categories. It's just a way of looking at things from different perspectives, different aspects, and understanding them better in a multidimensional way. And this connects also to that all knowledge is interdisciplinary. I said that in one of the early videos, one of the first or second video. All knowledge or transdisciplinary, even, not just interaction between disciplines, but it transcends discipline. Knowledge is discipline or arbitrary. Knowledge is transdisciplinary. And so there is no such thing as alternative facts or psychotic ideas. We need to be grounded in facts and knowledge, so we don't start saying that there are alternative facts or some psychotic ideas are just as good as non-psychotic ones, right? And psychotic meaning they're divorced from reality, right? So it's no connection to reality. That's psychotic ideas. Like the one saying that Ukraine is guilty for starting the war, which Russia invaded Ukraine, not vice versa, or saying that it's an accident that Russia rains down ballistic missiles on Ukrainian cities. It's an accident. They accidentally invaded Ukraine, and they accidentally are killing children and civilians. Psychotic, as I said. So thank you very much for listening. We will pick this up, study of knowledge in one of the future, with looking at gnosis, gnosiology, and but the next video is actually going to be specifically about the war in Ukraine, the origins of the conflict, and the basic facts related to it. And then the next video, subsequent video after that, will look at the anti-psychiatry and critical psychiatry movements. Because my friend who's a subscriber and to my channel asked me to do that video sooner rather than later, so that's I'm reacting to her request, and I'm excited to be doing so. So those are the two next videos, and after that we'll pick up again with the gnosiology and epistemology and examining knowledge and truth. Thank you. Please support Ukraine. If you're not supporting already, start supporting. I provide links in every video in the description. Support my content if you like it, share it, comment, subscribe to my channel. It helps encourage me, and it helps will help me build this channel into something useful and important. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.